Hello, I am Dr. Alan Clifford. On the 4th of July, I intend to vote for Reform UK. I am most certainly very impressed with these men, but I'm rather concerned about this man, Zia Yusuf, the Muslim entrepreneur who has made a very generous donation, the largest of all apparently, to Reform UK. I'll talk about him and his contribution at the impressive Birmingham rally event yesterday a little later. But over the past weeks and months, I have followed very closely all the interviews and the discussions about the Reform UK agenda. And I have no doubt in my own mind that the other main contenders, the Tories and Labour, are really not worthy of one's vote. And certainly from a Christian perspective, I don't really think that any true Christian can vote for these discredited and decadent parties. And when I say I'm a Christian, I am a Bible-believing, authentic Christian. I'm not a woke Christian. I'm not a multi-faith Christian. I do believe in the Bible as the Word of God, and that provides the benchmark for all our understanding of life, of the Christian life, and of national life, and of politics. And therefore, from that perspective, I have been impressed at the way that British values have been emphasised and promoted by Nigel Farage and others. Yes, their emphasis upon family and community and country are certainly values that I, as a Christian, would most certainly endorse. No question about that at all. And over the months, Nigel Farage has often made reference to our Judeo-Christian heritage. He's not been slow to mention that, even when so much of the secularized media and the other candidates dare not mention anything religious. So I applaud Nigel Farage for alluding frequently to our great past. The best of British has really been inspired by our Judeo-Christian heritage. Yes, that is my perspective, no question about that. But yesterday, the Birmingham event, which was most impressive in many ways, and the speakers were very commendable, from Anne Widdecombe right down to Nigel Farage. Yes, it was all very impressive. And you might remember that a few weeks ago, Nigel Farage, with reference to the Birmingham event, he said that Zia Yusuf was going to be a star of the event. And certainly he was indeed very impressive. And yet you will notice that there was no reference in the entire event to the religious dimension in all this. No reference to our Judeo-Christian heritage, not even a reference to Islam. Zia Yusuf did not even declare that he was a Muslim, but we all know these basic facts. But this is where I'm very concerned about the future. There has been much discussion, of course, about the future. Reform UK hope to establish a bridgehead. They're looking forward not to getting a massive number of seats at this election, but they hope to build the opposition, build a new movement ready for the 2029 election, in which Nigel Farage might possibly become the Prime Minister. It's all very grandiose stuff. But the question has also been raised as to who might be Nigel Farage's successor. Who is the heir apparent? And I wonder whether in his own mind, and in perhaps the mind of others, Zia Yusuf, the Muslim, might be a candidate in that respect. He certainly spoke very, very well. He spoke glowingly about our history, our values, our acceptance of immigrants. And he thought this was a great country for immigrants to settle in and to build their lives. He made glowing references to our past, including the abolition of slavery, when so much has been made of the slave trade in recent months, and Britain has been the target of criticism by so many from the secular perspective of things. Our past has been discredited, and the best of British has simply been ignored. So it's good to hear Zia Yusuf referring even to these things. But again, you will notice there was no reference to anything Christian in the entire event. But this is so vital and so important, because it's not enough just to express Judeo-Christian convictions and the heritage, but what does it mean in terms of being a Christian? Doubts, of course, have been raised by some about Nigel Farage's personal experience, if he too is concerned about family, and that the best way to bring up children is in a loving family of mother and father and so forth. Yet he did admit that his own circumstances do not entirely do him credit in that respect. So there's a certain degree of honesty which is very admirable in Nigel Farage. And he also made in an earlier interview a reference to the need for the Ten Commandments, although he tried to laugh off the idea that he found some of them rather difficult. But Nigel Farage has indeed made reference to Christian forgiveness in another interview that I remember. So I think whatever is the spiritual realities lying behind all this, there's enough in the agenda and the objectives and the plans of Reform UK that make it encouraging for me as a Christian to vote for them. However, the issue of Islam is something that I have mentioned in a couple of videos already. And I have taken Nigel Farage to task for failing to make a distinction between the moderate Muslims and the militant Muslims. Indeed, he is very critical of the aggressive Muslims, the jihadists, the violent immigrants that he's alluded to, very rightly, the young men who have come across in the boats and who do pose a great threat for several reasons. But he obviously doesn't take the view that Islam itself is a danger. And I would imagine that that's one of the reasons why he welcomed Zia Yusuf. Although he was a Muslim, yet he's brought up in this country, and he has certainly given expression to admiration for our values. I wonder what the more extreme Muslims in the United Kingdom, those whom Nigel has rightly exposed, I wonder what they think about Zia Yusuf, because it's a feature of the Islamic religion that you must not make too close a friendship with the kafir, the enemies of their religion. And here is this businessman making this generous donation to Reform UK. He's certainly out of step with the rigorous features of the Islamic religion. It's quite possible that he's been influenced by not only the tolerance of our UK values, but perhaps Christians as well. But nonetheless, he was not slow in endorsing and affirming his Islamic convictions. But this, to me, is where the problem comes in. Because while it's been emphasized that there is a threat, an invasion of the warriors in the boats coming across the channel, basic Islam itself is not viewed as a threat, even though the Islamic religion itself does inspire these warriors. But the more moderate kinds, they seem very attractive. And certainly Zia Yusuf came across in a very presentable manner, and I applaud so much of what he said. But thinking long term, if men such as him and others were welcomed into the inner sanctum of the management of Reform UK, there could be a danger here. And the danger very simply is this, that if there's no encouragement of the more violent jihadic type invasion of the UK, there is a danger from the growing Islamic community within this country. It's a growing demographic which could pose a threat to those who wish to endorse our Judeo-Christian heritage. You cannot really have it both ways, because basic fundamental Islam is hostile to Judeo-Christianity. Indeed, it may be genuinely assessed as being blasphemous and brutal and backward. Blasphemous because it rejects the essential doctrines of the Christian faith, the deity of our Lord Jesus Christ, the truth of the Trinity, of his sacrificial death upon the cross for the sins of the world, his resurrection from the dead. All these things are dismissed by official Islam. They always have expressed these views. So there is, in fact, an inherent contradiction between the Islam of Mr. Yusuf and the Judeo-Christian values that Nigel Farage has given voice to. So the problem is, how can these things be reconciled? Well, basically they can't. And one only hopes that the likes of Mr. Yusuf and his friends might be drawn more closely into a full understanding of the authentic Christian position. One would hope too that Nigel Farage himself will understand and more fully embrace, not simply for political and cultural reasons, the true tenets of the authentic Christian faith. Now, there is something in the past, in Greek history, which gives me concern and illustrates my concern at the present time. We all know about the Trojan Horse. We all know about the statement, "Beware Greeks bearing gifts," and the way that the Greeks eventually overthrew Troy through the Trojan horse, which was welcomed into the city. This horse, which was full of Greek warriors, who then were able, at the dead of night, to open the gates of the city and let in the army that had returned on their boats. Yes, the boats came back and Troy was conquered. I mention this classical history for one simple reason. that when one thinks of the charming generosity of Zia Yusuf, I'm inclined to say, beware of Muslims bearing gifts, because they may be embraced within the inner circle and the wider population, the voters of Reform UK. But there is a great danger that we could be drawn subtly and seductively in a more Islamic direction, not by the warriors on the boats, but by the growing acceptance of the Islamic ideology within our society. So looking ahead, the only hope for the future, yes, there's on a short-term basis, I can see Reform UK as being a great alternative to make Britain great again in the best possible sense in the short term. And I do hope Nigel and Richard and all the candidates will have good success. I can't see any better alternative in the current crises through which we're passing as a nation on so many levels. But looking ahead, unless the Reform UK agenda becomes more explicitly Christian in a committed way, I think the values that are the best of British, our Christian heritage, will eventually be conquered and and destroyed. So it's so important for us to think carefully about our future. We've got to become, as a nation, committed Christians, not simply using our Judeo-Christian culture for political reasons and opportunity. We've got to go all the way for Christian values. So I therefore pray for our nation. I pray for the candidates. I pray for Zia Yusuf, that he and his family, and all the other moderate Muslims whom he represents, that they might become true Christians. Otherwise, don't forget Troy. Don't forget Greeks bearing gifts. Don't forget what happened. It could happen in this country too, but for the grace of God. So I share these thoughts with you and ask that you will consider them. And I pray that for all those who will be voting for Reform UK on the 4th of July and doing so with conviction and with enthusiasm, I hope that they will not only think of immigration, not only think of the National Health Service, not only think of education and all the other issues, but think deeply about the spiritual roots that made this country great. And likewise the United States and throughout the rest of the British Empire. It was the gospel of Jesus Christ that made us what we are, and things have declined in such a dreadful manner because of the decline of this Christian commitment. So as I see the situation, the only hope for the future, even on a Reform UK platform, is to go forward with reformation, revival and renewal, with the Bible as our basis, with the gospel of Jesus Christ as our inspiration, as a message for a broken Britain. It's only the gospel of Jesus Christ that can provide the remedy for all our ills. Well, thank you for listening. I leave you to ponder these various thoughts that I have shared. Thank you for watching.